Hey everybody, JCB here with the Awesomist, and you're watching the Awesomist YouTube channel. So now that The Force Awakens is the most successful movie of all time, can we please stop holding George Lucas up as some great filmmaker? Recently, George Lucas made some critical statements about the new Star Wars movie, and I can't help but think he sounds a little jealous.
They wanted to do a retro movie. I don't like that. I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and okay,
and maybe you should be jealous. As a director, George Lucas is perplexed in his awfulness. He has this weird, inconsistent style that is consistently bad. I mean, his earlier work was alright, but nothing to really write home about. THX 1138 was somehow both pretentious and cheesy, while American Graffiti was a fantastic trip down memory lane for those of the appropriate age. For anyone else, it's just another empty throwback film romanticizing an era we never knew, and successful almost entirely because of nostalgia. Star Wars stands out as the one really good movie he's ever directed, and it was that realization that first got me thinking about Lucas as a filmmaker and how that first Star Wars might have been a fluke. I mean, even today, if you look at his newer films, they've been anything but successful. In fact, Lucas has seen more success as a film producer and as a businessman than as a filmmaker. He created ILM, THX, and Skywalker Sound, three companies that have drastically improved the way we watch movies. But when it comes to directing, he falls short. In fact, I'd say Star Wars was a huge success despite Lucas.
I made money in spite of myself.
And I'm not just saying that because J.J. Abrams was able to recapture the tone and spirit of the original Tridge. I'm saying that because George Lucas makes garbage. It's no secret that both Return of the Jedi and The Empire Strikes Back benefited immensely from Lucas taking a step back from writing and directing. Director Irvin Kushner and screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan did a fantastic job fleshing out the Star Wars universe by giving us the context and motivations that were missing from the first film. In A New Hope, Darth Vader is just some thug. He flies around in a TIE fighter like any other soldier, and even gets bossed around by old men. But in Empire and Jedi, his place in the overall story is truly established. We see Vader more or less leading the Empire, and we learn what more machine now than man truly means for the character. At times, we actually feel a little sympathy for him and learn how he relates to the heroes in this story. Literally. We learn about the Force and how powerful it is through Luke's training, which was something that was only hinted at in the first film. There is even the beginnings of a love triangle that would eventually gross out the entire planet. At best, A New Hope provided a framework for other creators to build upon, but then when George Lucas went back and had his chance to build on it, we got those terrible prequels. Nothing felt right, nothing looked right, because Lucas was unfamiliar with his own franchise, having only made the one film back in 1977. And even then, as a young director, he didn't really have much say in how it turned out.
I was so disappointed about what my vision was and what it actually turned out to be.
He says this because his creative ideas were challenged and in most cases overruled at every turn. Some of these ideas involved using strange overexposed colors, lots of shadows and hot areas, plus soft focus lenses and gauze. Luckily, he hired an experienced cinematographer named Gilbert Taylor who actually understands how to shoot a movie and who refused these ideas outright, going so far as telling Lucas to explain what he wanted and trust him to make it look good. And this is not the only instance where hiring more talented people made the difference. The entire look and feel of the lived-in Star Wars universe was envisioned not by George Lucas, but by Ralph McQuarrie, who drew up the original concept art. Lucas pointed directly to these images when it came time to make sets, props, and costumes. It's been said that the concept art alone sold the studio on the first film. Additionally, the special effects team at ILM worked on their own for a year to create the technology they would need to film the special effects shots that won Star Wars an Oscar and cemented the film's place in history as a first true blockbuster. These are the same special effects that George Lucas would later cover up or completely replaced in the special edition, along with the inclusion of a bunch of other crap nobody asked for, but George Lucas thought was a great idea. Though the real kicker was the editing. It's pretty common knowledge now that the original edit that George Lucas did of the movie Star Wars was a complete wreck. So when the studio brought in two professional editors to save the movie, they really did save the movie. They cut out unnecessary scenes that went on too long, were boring or redundant, and in some cases just plain stupid.
Right now I don't feel too good.
In other instances, they used footage in ways it was never intended so they could add energy and excitement to the scene. The footage George Lucas shot was then refocused and rebuilt into the movie we all know and love today. So when fanboys try to justify the praise George Lucas gets by saying if it weren't for him we wouldn't even have Star Wars, I feel it's more important to point out that if it weren't for these other more talented people pushing Lucas against his will, Star Wars would have been terrible. It would have flopped at the box office and we wouldn't be looking forward to episodes 8 and 9 right now. And if you still don't believe me that George Lucas is some kind of robot designed to spit out bad ideas, just go back and look at the original first draft of Star Wars. And now, I get it, a lot of first drafts are very and sometimes even drastically different from the finished product, but the first draft of Star Wars that Lucas came up with was fucking terrible. In fact, they recently made a comic based on that first draft, and it's pretty bad. It's full of the typical bad George Lucas ideas. Han Solo was supposed to be a lizard, Chewbacca was supposed to be a bigger lizard, and C-3PO was gonna sound like a used car salesman. George Lucas actually fought for that last idea until the very end of production on Star Wars, and I believe that idea was carried over to the prequels for the character Watto. So just imagine Watto's voice coming out of C-3PO, and that's what George Lucas wanted.
What, you think you're some kind of Jedi waving your hand around like that?
Speaking of the prequels, they're the perfect example of George Lucas getting exactly what he wanted and having complete control. He wrote, produced, and directed all 3 of those films, and they're all terrible. And if you disagree with that last statement, that's fine. It just means you don't care about the art of storytelling or the craft of filmmaking or what separates a good film from a crappy one. If Red Letter Media's Mr. Plinker reviews didn't convince you these films are bad, I don't think anything can change your mind at this point, and you might as well stop watching right now. Go buy yourself a ticket to see Boonie Bears. I'm sure it's right up your alley. Now for the rest of you, I'm gonna digress for a minute here so I can provide an example of how George Lucas takes bad ideas and forces them into movies despite the fact they make no sense and have long-lasting ripple effects. You see, in episode 3, Padme Amidala, God what a stupid name, gives birth to baby Luke and Leia and then dies. Oops, I mean, spoiler warning. This review contains footage from a movie that is fucking terrible. Senator Organa takes baby Leia to Alderaan while Obi-Wan takes baby Luke to Tatooine to live with Owen Lars. This way the babies can't be found and exploited or harmed by Darth Vader. And that's not a bad plan. I mean, other than the fact that Obi-Wan took Luke to the planet his father's from and is thus somewhat likely to return to at some point. Seriously, why didn't you make Anakin live somewhere else? You have a whole universe to explore, and yet Tatooine is in 5 of the first 6 movies.
Every movie I worked very hard to make them different. I make them completely different with, different planets, with different spaceships, with different, to make it, different planets, with different planets.
But then you realize that while Senator Organa was smart enough to change Leia's last name, apparently these 2 idiots were both too stupid to change Luke's.
Use the Force. Think.
So instead of Leia Organa and Luke Lars, he's still Luke Skywalker, the exact surname Vader would be looking for on a planet Vader has connections to. Now you might be thinking, why would Vader search at all when he thinks his child died with Padme? Well, okay, that doesn't explain Leia's last name, but I'll play your game. In Revenge of the Sith, Anakin is aware that Padme is pregnant, and Palpatine tells him that in his rage, he killed her. So no reason to doubt that, right? Yet in The Empire Strikes Back, Vader had no reaction when the Emperor told him their new enemy is Luke Skywalker.
We have a new enemy, Luke Skywalker.
It's implied that he already knew this information. Now back before the prequels existed, I had always assumed that Darth Vader knew he had a son out there somewhere and that their paths would cross someday. And after the big reveal in Empire, I had assumed that it was actually Luke's presence that Darth Vader felt on the Death Star and not Obi-Wan's as we were all meant to believe.
I sense something. A presence I've not felt since...
But now, thanks to the prequels, Vader's supposed to believe that his child died with Padme, so his total lack of surprise makes no goddamn sense. Of course, Lucas did try to address this in the special edition by changing the Emperor's dialogue and Vader's response to sound as though this is a revelation.
I have no doubt this boy is the offspring of Anakin Skywalker.
How is that possible?
Search your feelings, Lord Vader. You will know it to be true.
But 20 minutes into the movie, Vader already knows he's looking for Luke Skywalker.
That is the system, and I'm sure Skywalker is with him.
And it even mentions Vader's obsession with finding Luke Skywalker in the opening crawl. So this makes absolutely no sense either way. Instead, the prequel should have ended with a fearful Padme taking her babies and hiding with Obi-Wan's help. Anakin, meanwhile, would have been suspicious of Obi-Wan's intentions, and you could have a whole nother love triangle thing without all the incest.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
This same jealousy and mistrust could have played a major role in his turn to the dark side, making Vader's loss more self-imposed and sad than ultraviolet and angry. As it is now, Vader should have been pissed in this scene. This is the first time he's seen Obi-Wan since losing every one of his limbs, the woman he loves, and the child she was carrying. Vader should have been bursting with rage. Instead, he taunts Obi-Wan, bragging about how far he's come as a Jedi.
When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
The worst thing about the prequels is not the fact that they're terrible movies, which they are, but that their terribleness ends up bleeding over into the original trilogy. George Lucas's meddling through prequels and special editions has created a garbled mess of what was once a great story, and I think it's just because George Lucas doesn't know how to make a good movie. He directed one Star Wars film that was good despite his best efforts, and 3 horrible Star Wars movies in which he had complete control of the outcome. If you ask me, Lucas doesn't have a leg to stand on when it comes to criticizing any new Star Wars movies. And as I said at the start of this video, I think his criticisms really do come from a place of envy. While he was filming The Phantom Menace, James Cameron's Titanic was breaking all sorts of box office records, and Lucas famously remarked,
You know, we're never going to beat Titanic. Nobody can.
he was concerned with this because Titanic beat the record that until that point had been held by either himself or his good friend Steven Spielberg for almost 30 years. The first non-James Cameron movie to beat Titanic is Star Wars: The Force Awakens, and George Lucas had no hand in it at all. That has to hurt. In a way, I guess I should thank George Lucas. Thank him for creating the initial spark that spawned a franchise and universe we all know and love. But mostly thank him for stepping away with his billions of dollars and letting people with a true love of the franchise give it a shot. People like J.J. Abrams, who care enough to put down their coffee and get up out of their chair at a real location to work with practical sets and effects in order to craft a real film with feeling and depth for all of us to enjoy. Thanks for getting out of the way, George. Now if you can stop acting like you can make a better movie, that would be great.
I don't like sand.
We all know you can't. I'm sure this video will anger some people, so if you disagree, feel free to leave a comment down below. And if you agree with my opinion or you have something you want to add, I'd love to hear about it. As always, stay tuned for more videos, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, keep being awesome.